of Kittens and Broken Things, Chapter 54. Sanar closed his eyes after Garrus, fanning, left. Sanar was infuriated and exposed, having wanted to provoke the Taurian to the violence he was accused of being willing to inflict upon Kara. There was no need to tell the men that had Kara been alone upon waking him, there was no doubt Sanar would have wished to take full advantage of her vulnerability. Would he have? He had been given no opportunity to discover. Even before the surgery, he'd postulated it. He had warned Garrus specifically. He'd warned Kara with his silence, because she already knew. What he wanted was not violence. Yes, it began that way. For all the times Kara infuriated, charmed, and tempted him, it certainly began that way in fantasy. He needed that. He needed his speed and his strength and his ability to pin her to the bed, to the floor, to the wall, to a desk, to anything. Gods knew he could, and he wanted to. It had often occurred to him to try in her cabin. That was a favored setting. Regardless of the surface to which she was pinned, the element he required in his fantasy was that she was pinned to him and by him, shocked and wanting green eyes, a necessity. The violence was only there to prove that he was absolutely serious, expecting her to be serious in return. He knew exactly how her body felt pressed to his, the scent of her, her trembling shock and trust. He knew that from Beckenstein, from stroking his fingertips over her cracked ribs. Her facing him was a favored position due to its reflection of remembered reality. But he also wanted her back pressed to his chest, her head to the side. Always green-eyed shock, trust, forgiveness, giving. So many things she was known for lavishly providing to her loved ones. He was loved by her. He was wanted by her. Those were truths. There were merits to be explored in this position, keeping her pinned, trembling acquiescence in the lines of her body. He did not need venom. He did not need whispers, silence, and inevitability as he traced the curve of her trembling lower lip with a steady finger, down her throat, along her collarbone, her arm, her waist, her hip, down to her ass. Her other hand would slowly twine fingers with his, tightly, held against the wall by both their wills. He would smile as her eyes closed over her deep sigh of surrender. His palm would move down her thigh, his arm hooking under her knee. He would lift her up the wall to her gasp and give. Here she might whisper, "Please," or be speechless. Say his name, whatever name of his that held value to her. Here, he would taste the skin of her throat bared to him, her body open, offered, and taken, his body given back to her in strokes of devotion. No pain, no violence, nothing but the proof of his body's promise delivered to her, revelation, and full potential to the music of her whimpers, his moans, and the knowledge that she would never want to leave being pinned by him, pinned to him. In each fantasy, yes, Ed was never a factor because all that mattered was her giving herself to him and iterations of what he wanted. She'd leave Garrus for him. They'd leave together. That's what she'd always wanted to do. She'd come to him whenever he asked. Do whatever he asked. Just tell her what he wanted, and she would do that. Anything. Anything. With those fantasies in their layered, dizzying spin, their gravity and soporific well, even after the surgery, after a lost limb, they were iterations of nothing new but her added potential debt and guilt, the form of his forgiveness. Yes, Ed was not present. This was purely selfish desire, and in his fantasies at least, he would do exactly as Garrus had predicted. Use her pain. Own it. Ease it. Form an unbreakable tie, emotionally pinning her to him, and then physically pinning her to him, replacing that force with ardor and persuasion. An unbroken and reinforcing circuit, always live and sparking. What was clear in Garrus's amused response to Thane's clumsy and drug-addled threats was that Garrus understood perfectly that what would really happen, what would eventually happen, once violence and lust were sated or denied, and they would, in reality, be denied. Sennar would be on his knees, begging her for forgiveness. He would be the one confessing what he had always wanted, what he needed, what she would not give, what she could not give. Garrus had not been lying when he'd said the time was allowed in part to protect Sennar. Kara might be willing to give her life to a blow of violence from his hands, but the pinning and pining would lead nowhere. Garrus was right, and her willingness to die did not correlate to her willingness to betray her bondmate or grant Sennar any of his real wishes, which revolved around not her death, but her surrender.
She would never beg you.
Those words had not been spoken in the tones of intended provoked anger or spite, only knowing and even gentle warning, understanding, pity. Knowing because Kara had never begged Garrus for a thing, and never would. Wisdom from a man who had been given the rights to her true nature and had fallen to his knees for her years ago, never to rise. Not ashamed of that in the least. Proud, right, owner of her trembling lip and whimpers. Garrus had gallingly carried her scent with him into the room, offensive as a haunting human ghost he could not reach through the veil, this Taurian, the only medium she would speak through. She would carry his scent when she came here after gaining his permission to do so, not having begged him, but having allowed him to protect her, having surrendered to his will. Damn the man. Damn being sedated, helpless, and hated every moment, and being seen and forgiven for being in that state. Thane Krios had once been a frightening, unpredictable man. It appeared Sennar too alone would face different challenges, outwitted and predicted, rendered helpless and not feared enough to make the state worth his time. The Turian knew what chain was around his neck and exactly how far his lunge would take him. Short. Always short. He was not grateful for not having the opportunity to do something honest enough to earn the experience of begging Kara's forgiveness. Fury about Yased's leg was in fact reserved for the gods and not Kara. Gods he did not truly believe existed. That Yased was alive at all, that he could be taken by reapers, that she could be taken by reapers. He needed to see her. Having Sinar threaten Garrus's seduction made Kara smile all the way to the hospital. She couldn't say why. It made her feel better. It was bizarre, and she knew it was going to be okay somehow. She stopped in to say hello to Yased, but he was sleeping. Sinar was awake, his eyes meeting hers as soon as she opened the door. She closed it quietly, meeting his eyes and not breaking that contact. She had last seen him with closed eyes, mechanically ventilated, wondering if he would speak to her again. He didn't speak, and neither did she, but his expression was one of welcome, worry, regret. He held out his hand, and she ran to him. She reached out her hand to grasp his, and he leaned forward, pulled her closer, arm around her waist and another pulling her up onto the bed with him. She tried to get her knees and elbows under her, keep her weight off of him, saying, "Your incisions!" He ignored her and hoisted her higher, one of his arms a constricting band around her back, his hand in her hair, his lips in her hair. He was humming, the drill sound of consoling, of comfort. This moment dedicated to that, and nothing else allowed. She needed him, needed this sound, settled without collapsing against him where he arranged her, and didn't say anything further, afraid if she said something about protecting his chest against injury he'd respond by saying she was of course welcome to anything there. She need only reach inside. She focused on his heartbeat and his hum, both strong and real. She strained to try to hear a difference in his lungs, but she hadn't been held to him at times when she was focused on his infirmity, only hers. She was grateful to imagine clear lungs. Yased's bravery reflected in 2 lives lived well and long. He hummed, stroked her back, stroked her hair. She held still and indulged in the miracle of easy breath. It was a long time before he said, "Please forgive me, Lusa." She was curious enough to not give blanket forgiveness for whatever in the past or whatever in the future, unnamed. So she teased. "Well, if you want Garrus, it's really up to him." He sounded like he was smiling. "I claim obvious infirmity. I am still under the effects of drugs and fury and foolishness and cannot be held responsible for my actions or words. So there's nothing to forgive. Garrus is an attractive man. I am under orders to not be provoked. So don't be. You make it difficult, Lassam. And maybe I should ask to be forgiven. Perhaps we begin again. I claim a new life. My behavior easily explained as each new child brought into the world, if healthy, does so with screams and raging. Did you scream? Metaphorically. Fitting a metaphoric rebirth. As I begin a new life, I of course must find my purpose, which is you. I know you. I see you. I seek your forgiveness. You have not died, therefore you are not free for new purpose, but you can grant me mine. I had to see you, Lesson. I expected you at my side when I woke. Though my lungs are changed, my heart remains the same, and my temper formidable, as predicted. I'm truly sorry I wasn't there. I wanted to be. I would not have hurt you. You say that now, Lesson. I would not have hurt you. I know what I might have done. It would not have been pain. What might you have done? That I must save until you have passed from this life or are free to open that door. So you're saying, if I wake you up in the future, I'm asking for it? I am asking, listen, for faith that although I must misdirect Yased, though I apparently must react with childish spite to your bondmate, for all he represents as an obstacle, you are safe with me. But I provoke you easily. By breathing, yes. Although I am not proud of my behavior at my metaphoric rebirth. Had you been there, I am certain I would not have harmed you. I would not have allowed you to provoke me into harming you. Never. My behavior was poor because you were not there, because I feared what kept you from my side when you belonged there. The fear that perhaps gatekeepers, well-meaning or not, would convince you to not see me again. Garrus asked me to walk away from you. That I cannot do, and he should not ask. That in itself was provoking. Even without rebirth, Lassam, you belong with me as you are now. I need you. That is truth. You have seen me at extremities of anger, at extremities of temptation, of temper, as only you can bring me to them, and not once have I struck at you to harm you. I asked you to forgive before my surrender. I asked you to meet your bondmate's family, your family. If promises are to be believed, my family. You appeared lovely and regal, and you made me proud, but you were in pain because of what you feared from me. They are your family, our family. Garrus takes this seriously, you know, promises of family. He means it. He was trying to protect you too. And so he did. And he was not provoked. I take family seriously as well. You are my family. Whatever time, whatever face, whatever burden, count upon that. That bond remains always. I asked for Manipar, Lassam, but my prayer to be in your life, whatever life, does not revolve around sex. You mean more to me than that. The words are so. There is a soul, and when you sense them, follow them, lead them, cherish them, love them. For the choices you will make together will be greater than the choices you could make separately. Through them you will be whole. She started to cry, continued to cry, his hands in a hum, soothing again, in her hair on her back, warm and vibration sinking into her spine, and the echo of the conversation she'd had with Garrus, that Sennar was asking to be near her, with her, so he could be his best self, his most real, to have faith that when he was with her, he would be. Before her sobs were anywhere near winding down, the door opened. Yased sat in his chair looking at them with shock, and then he closed the door. Kara burst into nervous giggles, and then Sennar laughed. Sennar raised his voice just loud enough to be heard on the other side of the door. Yased, come in, please. The door opened again, and Kara giggled harder, stress and grief and worry making Yased's face of horror and curiosity one of the funniest things she'd seen. She reached out a hand toward him, and then Sennar reached out his own. Sennar was the only one with a voice steady enough to say, "Please, come in. Join us." Yased narrowed his eyes and said, "Do I have to tell Counselor Vicarian again that you're in love with her? I knew it. I knew it." Perhaps Garrus has heard enough about who potentially holds his or his bondmate's affections. Come in, please. She should probably be guiltily trying to scramble off Sennar's chest, but his arm had moved to restrain her around her waist, and she was too weak to consider it, mostly giggling until there were hiccups. Yased narrowed his eyes at the hiccups, now more alarmed, this time medically. "What's that? Is she okay?" She said, "No." "She is overset." "So she what? Fell on you?" "I was pushed. I mean, pulled." "I am confined to bed and could not offer her a chair." "It's your father's birthday." "What's a birthday?" Seemed self-explanatory. Translators are weird. Drell do not celebrate those dates. Drell are stupid sometimes. When Yased was close enough, she gripped his hand and squeezed. Sennar took his other hand, and Yased said, "Well, this is weird." Here's a word. Platonic. Clothes on. Physical comfort of being close to each other. I can hear his heartbeat. I cannot hear wheezing lungs. That's because of you. It's evidence of continued survival. Plus, he insisted, "That's nice. Evidence should be enough by now. Are you getting up?" Sennar's arms tightened around her, and he said, "She is not. I still cannot offer her a chair." Yased looked around at the chairs pushed up against the walls, at least 3, and said, "I can." Sennar squeezed his hand. "No, you cannot. You are now occupied. I'm going to have nightmares, and it's you guys' fault." "Please," Yased, "don't worry about Garrus. Don't worry about your mom. You're not guilty. You're not witnessing anything furtive, just vaguely stupid and helpless. That's me, anyway. Vaguely stupid and helpless." Senar kissed the top of her head. You are not stupid. Listen. Yosed did not look the slightest bit reassured, and it was still funny. Senar would not let go of his son's hand, and he would not let Kara up, so they discussed medical progress and prognosis, excellent for both of them, the fact that Russ was going to be part of Yosed's rehab. Despite Senar's wish to be there to be Yosed's legs, Senar was under lifting restrictions himself for a span of time, and he likely should not have a woman on his chest, but she had already decided not to say anything about that. They stayed like that until Garrus ended up at the still open door, tilted his head, and said,
Good. Everyone's alive.
Yosed turned his head and said, They told me I wasn't allowed to look guilty. I think I look guilty. Garrus shrugged.
Don't be. She's been crying, though.
Kara held out the hand that Yosed had dropped with the attendant guilt, and Garrus walked over and took it. She assured him. Good crying. Garrus bent and kissed her cheek, saying,
As long as it was good.
Senar said. I wished to reassure her that she was forgiven, asked to be forgiven. I ask for the same from both of you, for whatever trespasses, imaginary or real. I promise to all three of you, I will do her no harm. I have not, I will not, regardless of her will on the subject at any point in the past or the future. Yosed said. Okay.
Of course, if I overstepped bounds and created a problem, I apologize as well.
Senar inclined his head. It appears we all wish to protect those we love.
That we do.
Yosed opened his mouth to speak, but a nurse then entered the room, took in the sight, and then glared. This is definitely not allowed, Yosed said. Told you. Garrus lifted Kara off Senar's chest and said,
Our apologies. We're stupid sometimes.
The nurse shooed them all out. Kara is still giggling, her arms around Garrus's neck, hiccups and tears, gratitude and silliness. Yosed levitated out in his mobility chair, saying, I'm going to need therapy.
Lots scheduled.
Different therapy.
We can get you that, too.
Garrus carried her to Yosed's room, got him settled, a nurse there waiting for him as well. As Garrus carried her out, he said,
You were supposed to wait to unsettle me until you got home.
If you'd waited until I got home, I would have.
I got impatient.
So extra unsettling.
You guys are okay then?
Yes, weird and okay.
That's good then. There's an official dinner to welcome you to the Madless, last minute. I'm to escort you there on time.
And I didn't ask him what I should wear.
I can help with that.
I love you so much.
I love you too, Verse. I'm carrying you out of here.
I'm not going to argue.
Thank the spirits. Think I can talk you into dancing?
Think I can resist the way you talk me into things?
That's what I like to hear.
Senar watched the vid feeds of Kara's public appearances in Sippertine, doing his best to do as he'd asked, as he'd been asked, as duty demanded. He was still coiled in the sand, but it was true that Kara warmed him, made his hibernation one of purpose and hope. She was fey, and so small among the towering Turians, her bondmate never leaving her side, making her smile and laugh, whispering in her ear, teaching her dance steps that were impossible for a human of her stature to match a Turian stride. So he picked her up at the waist and danced for her, with her, cameras drawn to them. Not a word spoken against the couple. No contracts against either of them, all withdrawn. All was well. That is all that need concern her, concern them, his new family. He would keep it well at all costs. Whatever lay coiled and cold would not strike, would not find expression, would not wake from hibernation, would not multiply in the dark. Rebirth would mark forgiveness, family, the impossible math of accountability turned to expressions of the ineffable. If the cold struck deeper at the warmth of her smile and the assurance of Garrus's talons around her waist, the knowledge that they shared a life, and that light between them, only them. He would remember her with her head rested on his chest, trying not to do any harm to him or his healing incision, gel skin allowing for no scar. There would be no scar. He would watch. He would wait. He would remain bound to her will until he was not.